Hello everyone, welcome to Ferrigno Freedom channel. I'm Dante Ferrigno. For those of you who've been here before, welcome back. For those of you who are here for the first time, I've been on a carnivore diet now known as the Lion Diet for the past 3.5 years, and it has just done miracles for me physically, mentally, spiritually. It has changed things like I never thought changing the way I eat would change things. And I've learned a lot of things about healthcare and the pharmaceutical system and big food along the way. Now, one of my viewers, Donna Peters, emailed me, told me that I have to watch this interview with Casey and Calley Means because it's mind-blowing. So I thought, well, if it's that good, I'm going to have to watch it with my good friends here on Ferrigno Freedom and see if we can't share some information about it. I found it on YouTube, and it's 2 hours and 20 minutes long. So I don't think I'm going to be showing the entire interview so we can get a good reaction to what they have to say today and see if it's something that's going to be useful for us in our pursuit of better health, physically, mentally, and spiritually. Let's take a look.
So I actually think this book is going to, I never say this, but I mean it. I think this book is going to have a big effect on the course of the country. And the reason I think that is because you two are the perfect people to write it. And so I never do this, but I just want to start with your bios. So your siblings, Casey and Calley.
Oh.
You happen to have grown up in the same neighborhood as me in Washington, like a block.
Siblings. For some reason, I had it in my head they were husband and wife. I knew they had the same last name. I didn't realize they were siblings. I'm more familiar with the gentleman's work than I am with his sister's work. But I'm looking forward to seeing what we got here.
From me. So I know the world that you're from. You're writing about food, nutrition, the regulatory bodies that are poisoning the country. You are a lobbyist, and you are a Stanford-educated physician. I just want to go through quickly each one, and starting with you. You're a doctor. Tell us the progression of your thinking on this and what it did to your life.
Yeah, absolutely. So trained at Stanford Medical School, then became trained as a head and neck surgeon.
Undergrad Stanford also.
Undergrad Stanford, medical school at Stanford, then went on to train in head and neck surgery.
Yes.
9 years into my postgraduate training.
How did you do in medical school and college?
Did well, was president of my Stanford class, graduating top of my class with honors in medical school, and went on to a very competitive surgical subspecialty, head and neck.
So I'm just saying that because normally I dismiss credentials out of hand, but these are real credentials and they matter, I think, to your credibility. Okay.
And I did what every good little medical student, wants to do, which is climb the ranks of that academic ladder. But, you
killed it.
Did well,
yes.
And I got to the top of that mountain, right? 9 years into my postgraduate training. And I looked around me and I realized that, patients in America are getting destroyed. Children, adults, the elderly. You're so distracted in your little surgical subspecialty, focusing on the ear, nose, and throat where I was, and you get distracted. You look around at what's happening in Americans, and our health is getting worse every single year. Patients in America are getting much sicker every year, more depressed. We're getting infertile, and life expectancy is going down in a country that's spending almost 2x more than any other country in the world.
So before we get into the details of what you did, tell us, of why you did what you did.
Yeah.
Tell us what you did. So
Yeah.
You spent your whole life working toward this goal. You reach the top, and then you decide not to do it?
Yeah. I'm in the operating room in my 5th year of my surgical residency, and I'm looking down at a patient in front of me who's on our 3rd revision sinus surgery. And, I know how to diagnose her. I know how to write the prescriptions. I know how to do the surgery. But what I kind of realized in that moment was I have no idea why this patient's actually sick. She has so many other health issues, prediabetes, arthritis. She's got some brain fog. She's got obesity, and she's got this sinus issue. And in my training, I was never, ever, ever taught to look at the whole patient, to look at how all these things are connected. And I was only taught how to, do the surgery and then bill for it. And I realized that there's a huge problem in how we're practicing medicine right now, which is we're ignoring the root causes of why Americans are sick. And we're profiting off of patients getting sick and then doing things to them. That's the way the business model of healthcare works. The way that healthcare, which is the largest and fastest growing industry in the United States, makes money is you have more patients in the system having more things done to them for longer periods of time. And when I kind of put some of these pieces together and realized that my training had totally, essentially incapacitated me from really understanding why patients are sick and how to actually help them thrive, I actually had to walk away from the surgical world because I realized that I was going to be making money off of essentially not spending time helping patients understand their health and actually just profiting off their illness.
So
I
9
left.
years into medical training at Stanford, you gave it up voluntarily.
On my birthday, 30th birthday, I walked into the office of the chair of the department, and I put down the scalpel and I walked away, and I devoted my life to why are Americans getting sicker every year? Why are 50% of American children dealing with a chronic health issue? This was less than.
We need more heroes like this in the medical system. It's a shame she had to walk away from it to be able to make a difference. But, this is something that's missing from people in the medical system today, is to realize they're not helping their patients with what's currently going on. The way this system is designed is only designed to profit. It's not designed to help people get healthy or cure problems. And it's frustrating. I know as carnivores, people in the carnivore community face this difficulty, is finding doctors who are willing to look at their new situation and how their health has improved as a result of a carnivore way of eating, and not get blowback from their doctors. A lot of times the doctors will say, oh, well, you can't do that. That's bad for you, and so on and so forth. Even though everything about them is physically better, you can see that they've lost weight. They've gotten all the extra fat off their body that's causes so many problems, that is such a precursor for all the other major problems that they were having, whether it was diabetes or gallbladder issues or liver issues or brain issues. So many things are affected by the diet that we have, where we have so much sugar and seed oil and all of the processed garbage that's in the food that we eat on a large portion of everything we eat today. It's frustrating. It's frustrating for people who are trying to get real answers about their health, when they're taking their health seriously and they're seeing improvements, and their doctors are pushing back against what they're doing to do that. That's why it's so nice to see some of the doctors who have come forward and taken steps to proclaim the benefits of carnivore and keto and low carb eating. People like Dr. Ken Berry and Dr. Sean Baker, and a number of them out there that are just really trying to get information out there to the community. If it wasn't for Dr. Jordan Peterson, who is a teacher from the University of Toronto, I believe it was, or at least he was in Toronto at a university there. For those of you who don't know who he is, I would have never known that carnivore was going to be the answer, but it has done so many things for my health. It's just hard to explain it all right here. I got lots of other videos on that. But what she's saying, she's putting her job and income on the line to really help people, as opposed to just doing the status quo, keeping her mouth shut, collecting her paycheck. Those are the kind of people we need in so many areas, healthcare being one of the biggest ones. Let's go ahead and press on.
1% 50 years ago. Why is our health getting destroyed the more that we spend? And
so that's what did they say when you walk into your colleagues at Stanford and say, I'm giving it up at 30?
It wasn't really a conversation. I knew that I couldn't cut into one more person until I understood why Americans are getting sicker every single year. I think that the unfortunate thing is that doctors don't really understand, because every level of our education is systematically focused on blinding us from thinking about root causes. We have over 100 medical and surgical subspecialties right now. And, how you make money in the American healthcare system is you take a patient with 10 different issues and you send them to 10 different specialists, put them on 10 different meds. Maybe they eventually have 10 different surgeries. You never actually are taught how to put the pieces together, look at the whole body as a system, which of course it is. And part of this is because, who are the people underwriting our medical education? It's the pharmaceutical companies. We are taught how to be very algorithmic and robotic in how we look at patients. And so
this is coming from a Stanford trained doctor that's saying exactly the things that I've been saying, is the pharmaceutical industry is what finances everything that has to do with what doctors learn about medicine, what doctors learn about nutrition, what doctors learn about prescribing and treating their patients, is financed and structured by the pharmaceutical industry, who is constantly doing things like slightly changing a medicine because it's about to go generic, and then they'll change one little aspect of it so that they can get a new patent on that medicine that would have run out and allowed it to be affordable, just so they can keep the cost ridiculously high. and make it impossible for people to actually get medicine that they may actually need to cure a problem. And then when you find out that even when they do cure a problem, the investors in these companies like Goldman Sachs, who sent out a letter to the company who put out the cure for Hep C just a few years ago, they basically sent them a letter saying, we're not interested in cures. We are interested in things that are going to keep the money rolling in. So if you're going to make cures, then you can forget about us financially backing what you're doing here. That's what we're up against right now. So her being a doctor and saying this means a lot. Hey, it's Dante Ferrigno. I just wanted to thank you first of all for watching this video, but I also wanted to tell you about my merch shop. I have a link in the description for a bunch of different items I've put together for you to be able to show your support for the carnivore lifestyle, and every purchase helps me to keep doing what I'm doing here on Ferrigno Freedom.
Ultimately, I left the surgical world and I went down the rabbit hole of asking why. Why are we getting sicker every year?
It's just such a radical move to do something like that.
Yeah. I mean,
your whole life you're working toward a goal and then you give it up?
Yeah.
After 9 years?
Yeah. You know, this is the thing that I understood and that I am working and we are spending our lives to evangelize this book, Good Energy, is that the reasons why Americans are getting sicker every year are very simple. Americans want to be healthy. Americans do not want to die early. They do not want to see their kids with all these chronic health issues like autism and food allergies and obesity and prediabetes and 40% of teens with mental health issues. No one wants this, but the system is rigged against the American patient to create diseases and then profit off of them. This is happening across almost every lever of our major industries, from processed food to tech to pharma. And so really what Americans need to understand is that these trends can stop immediately. We need to understand why we're sick, which is our primarily our toxic food system and the ways that systematically several industries are profiting off of our addiction and illness. And if we can understand that and create very simple top-down and bottom-up strategies to address it, Americans will become rapidly healthier. And so as a physician, you know, I took an oath to do no harm. And I took an oath to help patients thrive. And so the way that we can do that is by helping people understand the levers of corruption that are essentially keeping us sick.
I guess the reason I'm pressing you, and you're the sort of person, I mean, this is a company clearly doesn't want to talk about herself, which is great. But I think it's relevant because it speaks to the intensity of your commitment and to your sincerity. So you're giving up the prize, you're giving up the money, because you really believe this.
Yes.
And I think I just want to establish that at the outset.
Thank you.
Before we say anything more. So you're her brother. You're very close. I happen to know that. And you're obviously proud of your sister. She president of her class at Stanford. It's the kind of thing like, oh, my sister's at Stanford. She's at Stanford Medical School. She decides not to practice surgery, the most impressive of all specialties. What's your reaction to this?
I called her and said she was a complete idiot. I mean, we were raised in Washington, D.C., right next to you, kind of conditioned to climb up the ladder.
Of course.
I went to Stanford. I went to Harvard Business School. You know, that was what life is about, just kind of collecting those credentials. Casey, you know, research at the NIH, as we talked about, top of her Stanford med school class. To me, that was it. And truly, and you hit on this, she had I mean, this is her life. This was her identity. This is everything to her. And she bravely stepped away with no plan, just from a moral obligation. Man. And I thought she was a complete idiot. And what I know now and what I've been radicalized on is she has convinced me that this is the most important issue in the country. It's an issue of corruption that starts us.
I was praying about that this morning, just how the Lord to give me the strength to speak up when there's something that needs to be said, even when it puts financial means on the line. When you have to take a stand for something that's right and it might cost you, if you don't take a stand when it costs you a little bit, then you're going to wind up paying a much bigger price in the long run. This is something that has become evident to me when I study history and the rise of totalitarianism. The way that you lose everything is to keep your mouth shut when you should have said something. You know, there's an old saying I've heard is that all it takes for evil men to prosper is for good men to do nothing. And when you don't take that chance and say, no, I am not going to bear false witness and say that this is okay. I am not going to participate in this anymore. And you're going to have people that you love and that know you are going to tell you you're a fool for doing this because you're sacrificing yourself for nothing. That's not the case. You're sacrificing something for what means everything in the long run. And that's your freedom to be and say what you think and to do the right thing, to be able to be a part of the solution and not part of the problem. Anyway, I love that he's willing to admit that he was at that point in his life looking at what she did as being foolish, because I've had influences in my life that told me I was foolish for making the decisions I made when I left the retirement home industry, and I didn't have as much on the line maybe as they did, because as far as the dollar amount of what I was making was far less than what a surgeon would make, but it was everything for my family. And somehow throughout all of this, over the past nearly 4 years, well, more like 3 years since I left the retirement home industry, even though I've had to bounce around from job to job and I've had some difficulties financially, I haven't had a situation where a bill hasn't been paid. I haven't had a situation where we don't have a roof over our head. I truly believe the Lord provides for those who are doing the right thing and who are following the plan that He has for your life, which is to be bold and be courageous and say what needs to be said. That's where I am with that, and I hope it encourages you to not be afraid to say what needs to be said. Where you're told you have to say or do something that goes against your conscience, take a stand for what you know is right. Because if you don't, you'll get run over by those who want to control you and allow evil to reign in your life.
Med school being 50% funded by pharma and not training doctors on one nutrition class. Stanford Med School, Harvard Med School, 90% of med schools don't offer or require one nutrition class. Doctors simply aren't learning why people are getting sick, which we'd all assume they do. 80% of the course loads in pharmacology. It's on how to take people that are getting sicker and sicker and manage those conditions, not to cure them. And that's a huge problem because that dynamic of the largest industry in the country is destroying human capital.
So as your sister is on one end of the equation, you're on the other. So you both have, you're from a community of strivers. That's what DC is.
Exactly.
And merit badge gatherers. And you've gotten two of the greatest merit badges ever.
Right.
HBS, Stanford Medical School. But you're all of a sudden finding yourself in Washington. Can you just explain your background a little bit?
Yeah. So I just Casey was a bit smarter than me on the biology route. I wanted to be contributing to politics from an early age and went to Stanford to go back into politics. Studied economics, political science, went straight back to campaigns after school. What I learned quickly is that then campaigns over, you work for the biggest spenders in DC, and I found myself across the desks from food industry and the farm industry. The farm industry spends 5 times more in DC than the oil industry. By far the biggest spender. Bipartisan, you're working for pharma. But starting with food, I learned early on that the food industry, and this is my construct, the food industry and the processed food industry was created by the cigarette industry. And I think this is very telling. It's something I learned. So in the 1990s, the 2 largest food companies in the world were R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris. What happened is when the Surgeon General way too late in the 1980s said cigarettes were maybe problematic, these were some of the largest companies in the world with the largest cash piles of any company in the world. So what they did is they used their cash piles to buy food companies. We think about the 80s as the Wall Street era M&A, a lot of deals. The 2 biggest M&A deals up until 1990 in world history were cigarette companies buying food companies. So you had in the 90s, these 2 cigarette companies very strategically do 2 things. They shifted their thousands of scientists who were experts at making cigarettes addictive to the food department. So we had the rise of ultra-processed food where our food now is a science experiment. The second thing they did is they shifted their lobbying. So the cigarette industry, of course, was the biggest, lobbying spenders and had a good playbook. They shifted their playbook on lobbying and rigging institutions of trust to food. So they created the food pyramid. So the cigarette industry, through the food companies they bought, paid off the FDA, the USDA, Harvard to create reports saying sugar doesn't cause obesity. And they lobbied for the food pyramid in the 1990s, we all remember, which said, animal-based fats are bad, carbs are good. Remember, carbs and sugar were basically the base of the pyramid. So the American diet, because of that, because we trust our medical institutions, which they know, we shifted our diet significantly to ultra-processed food. It was very intentional, the food pyramid. That was a ultra-processed food marketing document that carbs were fine, sugar was fine. And that shifted, and you look at dietary patterns. Today, a child diet is 70% ultra-processed food. Now,
I remember going through that time period myself. In the 1980s, we used to look at things like TV dinners as being, that's not food. That's what you do when you're really lazy. That's what you do if you don't want to be healthy. And we used to eat normal food. My mom used to still cook stuff. I don't remember snacks being a part of my growing up in the 1970s and 1980s. But I do know that when my daughter was born in 1994 and my son in 1998, my first wife used to make all kind of snacks for them to take when they would go to school. And even my second wife, on raising our children up until I started a carnivore way of eating. Snacks are a regular thing that have been included in our mindset. And that has a lot to do with the commercial efforts and all the propaganda basically coming out of the cigarette companies that bought out all these food companies. And now it's normalized. When you walk into a grocery store, 90% or more of what's in there is not food. It's a food-like product. It looks like food on the box, but anybody with any sense has looked at the ingredients and says, what are these words? This was like, I didn't even learn these words in chemistry class. If you can't pronounce the ingredients in your food, then you might not need to be putting that inside your body. If you look at a box and it says genetically modified organisms, are you sure you want to put that in your body? Are you sure you want to give that to your children? Just because it's out there and that everybody's doing it, that's certainly not the things that we were taught when I was a kid. There's the reason why you do something. I remember my mother saying, if everybody jumped off a bridge, would you? Well, apparently we would, because when it comes to food, everybody's jumping off the bridge and it's just everybody's lining up to be the next to jump off and give their kids all this horrible food. I've been guilty of it. So I'm not judging anybody else out there who is struggling with this. I'm trying to let you know that there is a way to break free from this. But also we need to support those like Casey and Calley Means who are trying to make inroads on fighting this disinformation that has been created by big food, big pharma, and government working together. I think a lot of the doctors out there don't even know what they're dealing with. Just like Casey was talking about in her experience, she knows what she was trained, but it's so easy just to stay there and to make sure that you're getting your college loans paid off and paying off your house and taking care of your family and having all the money you want to do everything. It's a lot harder to say, you know what, I'm willing to risk the income that I have that will pay off my student loans and pay off my house so that I can tell people the truth about health and medicine and what's going on. If it wasn't for the fact that so many of you support what I'm doing here, I wouldn't be able to keep coming back and talking about this all the time. Every time I think I have said enough about this topic on my channel, I go out into public and I see so many people suffering from metabolic disorders that they could be fixing on a carnivore way of eating, and I realize I have to keep going. And I can't do it without your help. They can't do it without your help. So keep supporting in any way you can, and I appreciate you. The carnivore bar compared to movie theater snack prices, it's no competition. With a tub of popcorn running you over $14, I'd much rather enjoy the salty, crunchy, meaty goodness of a carnivore bar any day. And I don't have to cheat to enjoy my night out. Carnivore bar. Save 10 to 20% when you use my link in the description of this video.
That mean, right? Those are literally foods invented by the cigarette industry to addict kids. You know, obviously we've got sugar, but there's thousands of different ingredients and science concoctions that scientists work in a lab to make it more palatable, to make it more addictive. So food consumption, calorie consumption has skyrocketed. And the byproduct of these toxic ingredients that the cigarette industry I watched and helped with this, bought off the USDA, bought off the FDA, is they wreak havoc among our cells. The foundation of our diet is ingredients that we aren't biologically made to eat, that didn't exist 100 years ago. The foundation of our diet is three things when you look at any label. It's added sugar, processed sugar, which basically didn't exist 100 years ago, is just from natural sources. Ultra-processed grains, which were invented 100 years ago, the processing takes the fiber off. They're basically hidden sugars, devoid of nutritional value. And seed oils. Seed oils are the top source of American calories. And this is actually
seed oils
seed
are
oil.
the top source of American calories.
Soybean oil, canola oil. This is the baseline of American calories right now. And these seed oils were actually created by John D. Rockefeller as a byproduct of oil production. It's basically engine lubricant. And the Rockefeller and those aligned with him actually lobbied to have this suitable for human consumption. That's how seed oils came into the American diet. They're much cheaper, but they're highly inflammatory. And just by definition, just at the highest level, these ingredients and all the chemicals we can't name that are in ultra-processed food are not natural ingredients that our bodies are made to handle. So there's, as we talk about in Good Energy, this produces a lot of side effects to our cells. The food industry isn't trying to kill Americans. They're trying to make food cheap and addictive. And what I learned, in the morning meeting with the food companies, trying to lobby and influence the USDA, being the lifeblood of nutrition research, paying off, nutrition research at Harvard and Stanford as a junior employee, shocked by that.
So you saw that?
Oh, my first week, as working for these industries, it was a list of top professors. And the food industry pays 11 times more for foundational nutrition research than the NIH. You go to any nutrition school in the country, the lifeblood of their school, they'll proudly admit this is from the processed food industry. In the past 2 years, there's been 50,000 peer-reviewed research studies on nutrition. We're the only animal that has peer-reviewed nutrition studies, and we're the only animals that are systematically obese, diabetic, and being crippled by metabolic dysfunction. We're born with an innate sense of knowing what's right for us. The problem very strategically, and this is well known among the industry, is that ultra-processed food does, because they're able to do this science experiment with our food, it hijacks our biology, it hijacks our satiety signals. High fructose corn syrup, fructose, it makes us want to eat more. Because in the wild, when you see a bunch of fruit out there, you're well advised to eat it, historically. We've basically rigged our biology to hijack our signals that, make us satiated. So that's what ultra-processed food does. So that's the food industry, okay? The food industry actually, with their own set interests, want to make food addictive and cheaper. It kind of makes sense. The criminal devil's bargain is that it's highly tied to the healthcare industry. And as Casey said, the fastest growing industry in America right now isn't AI. It's not tech, it's healthcare. It's the largest and fastest growing industry. And just as a statement of economic fact, the best thing for that industry is a child getting sick. When a child gets sick, or any American gets sick with a chronic condition, with diabetes, obesity, kidney disease, heart disease, whatever, they go on a lifetime medication. They go on the metformin, they go on the statin, they have lifetime treatments. And they keep racking up more comorbidities. If you're diabetic, you have an average of 4 other comorbidities. So you keep racking up, but you don't die, you just suffer. You inevitably get infertility, depression. You start racking them up. So that's very good for the medical system to have these chronic conditions that need to be managed. Just from a pure economic standpoint, that's how the system's set up. That's all happening largely because of our food system and other metabolic habits we can talk about, but largely because of our rise of ultra-processed food that's really, really hacking our cells and really hijacking our cells. The criminal part, the devil's bargain, is that the healthcare system, you'd expect to be speaking out about why we're getting so sick, but they're not only silent on the reasons, they're not only trained Casey the first day of Stanford Med School that we're basically taking it as a given that people are lazy and going to get sick, we're just going to profit from treating them. They're silent on that, but they're actually complicit. Working for Coke, I helped steer money to the American...
Coca-Cola.
Yeah, working for Coca-Cola, they actually pay money to the American Diabetes Association. They actually pay money to the American Academy of Pediatrics. If there's one thing the American Diabetes Association, which sets the standard of care for diabetes management, should be doing, they should be saying, we're not going to accept money from Coke, which is diabetes water. They accept money from Coke. So there's
that's like Tyson Chicken subsidizing PETA.
Right.
It doesn't kind of make any sense.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's called a conflict of interest, and that's exactly what it is. And it shouldn't be allowed, but it is. But since it is allowed, you've got to use your head to decide what you're going to put into your body. And if it's going to be something that feeds your body what it needs, that's going to feed your children what their body needs, then you're doing the right thing. But then you've also got to be willing to take the flack that's going to come along with that, the social pressure that's going to push back against something like a carnivore way of eating, because we've been programmed improperly about this. We've been programmed to think that eating meat is bad for you, that eating salt is bad for you. And really, it's about sugar, seed oils, and ultra-processed food. In most cases, our vegetable and fruit has been contaminated with crossbreeding to make the foods sweeter, biological engineering of some kind to make the foods more pest resistant, or to make them where they don't germinate again so that you can't grow your own food from the food you're already buying, to make watermelon seedless. Well, those seeds in the old watermelon you could use to grow your own watermelons. Well, if they're seedless, you can't do that. So that means that you have to keep coming back to them. It has nothing to do with making the food better for you. It's designed to make it more addictive and cheaper for them to make so that they can make the most money on it. It's not designed to be healthier for you. That's what you've got to be able to accept.
Can you just give us the baseline condition of health in the United States?
Absolutely. So the word I used earlier, destroyed, is not hyperbolic in any way, shape, or form. 74% of American adults now are overweight or obese. Close to 50% of children are overweight or obese. 120 years ago, when someone was obese, there were case reports written about it.
Yes.
Literally, there were people in the circus if you had obesity.
Sideshow fat. Yeah, it was so unusual.
It was so unusual. It is now 74% of our country. 77% of young adults are unfit to serve in the military because of these issues like obesity. Now let's talk about diabetes. 50%, a full 50% of American adults have prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, which is a fundamental issue in how
Half the country?
Half the country, Tucker, have prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, and 30% of teens now have prediabetes. This was a condition that no pediatrician would have seen in their lifetime 50 years ago. 1% of Americans in 1950 had type 2 diabetes. We have 18% of teens with fatty liver disease, a disease that used to be in late stage alcoholics. Cancer rates are skyrocketing in the young and the elderly. Young adult cancers are up 79%. And this is the first year in American history we're estimated to have over 2 million cases of cancer. 25% of American women are on an antidepressant medication. 40% of 18-year-olds have a mental health diagnosis. We have the highest infant and maternal mortality rate in the entire developed world, despite spending 2x on infant and maternal care than any other country. So you have a higher risk of dying as a woman giving birth in America than any other developed country in the world. Autism rates in kids are 1 in 36 nationally. This was 1 in 1,500 in the year 2000, and the screening has not changed in California, where I live.
I just want to linger on that. And the screening has not changed. So
in 20 years,
the definition hasn't changed.
No, 1 in 32 from 1 in 1,500. In California, 1 in 36. Right now, it was 1 in 1,500. In California, it's 1 in 22. One of the worst states in the country for autism. So this is just a smattering.
What the hell is that?
And all of these conditions. I mean, and I could go on and on. Autoimmune diseases, infertility is at peak rates. I mean, I don't know how this is not front page news. Infertility is going up 1% per year. Sperm counts are going down 1% per year since the.
How is it not front page news when we have a disaster every other day on front page news? People aren't even watching mainstream media anymore because they know that it's just constant negativity, some disaster is happening, whether it's World War III or aliens landing. I mean, it's almost like the National Enquirer took over the national news and everything is a constant disaster. So when you hear something like this, it's like it barely even measures on the radar for a lot of people. But if anything should measure on the radar for us, something that affects our health, our ability to live, the ability of our children to live and enjoy life, this should be one of the top issues. But with so many other screaming fires out there that are going on, it's no wonder it's not top news. But that's where you come in, sharing these type of stories, watching these type of videos on the new media that we have here on YouTube and other channels. And you can find my channel on Rumble and Odyssey, and I'm on Facebook as well. I'm on X, so that you can still get this information should they ever shut me up on one particular platform. I'm out there, but I need your help to keep going, so keep watching.
1970s, Sperm counts are down.
Continuing
50%,
to drop?
Continuing to drop.
Oh, at an
actively.
increasing rate. Our bodies are crying out for help.
26% of women have polycystic ovarian syndrome. Now, the thing that people need to understand is that all of these conditions are caused or driven by the exact same thing, which is metabolic dysfunction, this core foundational issue of how our bodies on the cellular level function, which is driven by our toxic food system and our toxic environment. These subtle, insidious forces that are creating slow, progressive illness starting now in fetal life that allow patients to be profitable and on the pharma treadmill for their entire lives. They make us sick, but they don't kill us, and then we are drugged for life.
If we pay extra, could we maybe get some grease or fat?
One of the things I do to fight back against big food and big pharma is to recommend companies that make animal-based products that are good for our bodies and good for our skin. In this case, I'm talking about Vintage Tradition. Vintage Tradition tallow balms are a go-to for me now, especially the unscented one. I like it because it doesn't have anything extra in it other than extra virgin olive oil and tallow rendered from suet. Highly saturated and therefore more therapeutic than any other. So if you want some ancestrally appropriate skincare products that are going to help support the carnivore movement, head over to vintagetradition.com and use my discount code Dante, D-A-N-T-E, to save 10% on your order. Their products are fantastic. I love them and I use them all the time.